Oh, well, hello there. Welcome to the last video of Chapter 26 in the American Pageant for an AP U.S. History class or a regular U.S. History on the Great West in the Agricultural Revolution. Today we'll be looking at Farmers Take a Stand through Stand-pattism of the Republicans is Enthroned. So farmers are dealing with a lot. They have a lot of things going against them. A lot of them bought machines and had to pay back loans, and so many of them are being foreclosed. And so we have some early instances of farmers trying to unite together. You have the National Grange, or commonly known as the Grange, organized in 1867, led by Oliver H. Kelly. It was called the Patrons of Husbandry. Husbandry is making food or gathering food. So the Grange, excuse me. Its first objective was to enhance the lives of isolated farmers through social, educational, and fraternal activities. Farmers lived kind of by themselves out in the boons, and this was a way for farmers to get together, to hang out, to teach each other about, hey, this worked well for my crops or this fertilizer, and also just kind of joining together to try to just have some fellowship. They set up cooperatives to ship and buy in bulk, and so if you bought things in bulk, like if you go to Sam's Club or Costco and you buy the big giant 27-gallon tub of mayonnaise, you get a better price. So if whole communities can pool their resources and buy seed, they get a better price. If they ship in bulk, they get a better price. And so they did these things to try to help eliminate some of those extra costs that incurred as farmers. By 1875, this kind of social organization had 800,000 members or so. Some Grangers actually entered politics and made Grange laws. And so this was kind of a big deal. It transformed from just a social, fraternal, educational society to let's be activists, let's get things done. They tried to force public control of private businesses for general welfare. Institutions or industries that were very important, like the railroads, they tried to force that. The Grangers' influence faded, though, after the courts reversed their laws. They really had a lot of influence over state governments, but the Supreme Court routinely ruled in favor of big business because interstate commerce was regulated by Congress only, not by the state governments. You also get the Greenback Labor Party, which sought to improve working conditions of labor, and so you're kind of getting these seeds of, organization of political groups that have reform-minded agendas coming to the forefront. They hit their peak in 1878 to 1880. They ran James B. Weaver for president. Now you're probably wondering what's up with the picture. I mean, that's ZZ Top, which one of their most famous songs was called The Grange. And ZZ Top, wonderful rock and roll band from Texas. The ironic part is the only guy who doesn't have a beard is the drummer, and his name is Tom Beard. Wonderful. This is a political cartoon or a poster from the day. It says Farmers' Grievances in 1875, I feed you all. And so it just kind of shows all the things that all these people that the industries, all these different occupations, soldiers, clergymen, medical people, dry store goodmen, the president, the farmer feeds them all. So you better keep the farmers in mind. So the Prelude to Populism. The Farmers Alliance was next. It was formed in the 1870s, and it grew out of Texas in the 1880s to become kind of a national movement. By 1890, there were 3 million members of the Populist Farmers Alliance. They were more politically minded, not just socially and fraternal order. There were a lot of regional differences between the West and the South that tore it apart. You could probably guess it if you've been watching this series. Racism. What to do with African Americans kind of tore the West and the South apart. The South didn't want anything to do with African Americans, whereas the Westerners are just wanting numbers to have more of a voice in government. This all led to the Populist Party. They cooperated in buying and selling to gain control over the railroads and manufacturers, kind of those same things as cooperatives, or we would know them today as co-ops. They limited the power because they excluded blacks and landless tenant farmers. In response to this, you get the formation of the Colored Farmers National Alliance, which was formed in the 1880s to attract black farmers, but never big enough to really do anything. To be honest, I threw in a picture of Foghorn Leghorn here because that's all I can think of with farmers. I'm sorry, it doesn't have anything to do with it. My bad. So the Populist Party kind of patched together all these different ideas of how to help the little guy, how to help the common man out. And this is kind of their platform. They're the People's Party of the United States, formed in 1892. They have some radical revolutionary ideas that come around. They're about 20 years too soon. None of this stuff really gets passed, but then 20 years later in the early 20th century, this is kind of the seeds of the progressive movement. Populism is support for the common man. If you want to quote John Lennon lyrics, to be power to the people. Their platform, these are the planks of their platform here, is the government should own and operate railroads and telegraphs. They should have free silver. Not that, hey, you're an American, here's some silver coins, but currency should be based not on just gold, but also silver to try to expand the amount of money out there for investment, for business opportunities. And so, this idea of inflation, because there's too much or not enough money there, would help bring prices down. They also wanted the direct election of senators, that the people should vote those senators in, not be appointed by state legislatures. They wanted secret ballots. It used to be that when you voted, you get like a blue ballot if you're a Republican, and that's white, I'm sorry, on a red ballot if you're a Democrat or vice versa or whatever, and you would know, people would know who you were voting for. They should all have the same ballot. It should be in secret, so your vote is your vote and nobody knows what's going on. They wanted shorter worker days, don't we all, right? A national income tax to help fund some of these government programs. So there are some gains and a couple problems there. They won several congressional seats. They got over 1 million votes for president in 1892. They also nominated James B. Weaver, but they lacked funding, and they don't really sweep into Congress. They don't really take over the government. They don't have lasting election victories, but their ideas remain, and they come back, like I said, 20 years later. So the Panic of 1893 kind of put an impetus or an urgency to the people to try to, strengthen the populist stance that farmers and laborers were oppressed by the economic and political systems, that the man was keeping them down. The government, the big business, the courts, they're all against the common man. And so quote General, Jacob S. Coxey led a protest in Washington in 1894 demanding that the government start a public works program, that the government start some programs to fix up the country and to hire people that are out of work that needed money. His protest didn't do much. He got arrested for walking on the grass. Got to read those signs there. His invasion, I love that it's all in quotes, faded quickly, but it's kind of some early examples of unification, of people trying to get together and protesting the government using that First Amendment right of peaceful assembly and freedom of speech. This is a picture from the protest here, by the way. You also have Eugene Debs, who organized the American Railway Union. Eugene Debs, who becomes a socialist, runs for president, I think 5 times as the Socialist Party candidate. You have the Pullman strike of 1894, which was started when the Pullman Palace Car Company cut wages, and so the workers went on strike. There was a federal injunction to end the strike because they were interfering with the mail delivery. Basically, railroad workers across the country refused to handle any train that had a Pullman car. Pullman sleeping car. These were the cars that if you traveled across the country, you could have a bed and you could, relax a little bit. Most trains had a Pullman sleeping car. So it shuts down rail service across the country. And so the federal government actually gets involved with a legal injunction saying you can't do this. You're stopping the mail delivery. That's a federal offense. And so they're using these laws against the workers that are supposed to be protecting the workers. Federal troops were called in to break up the strike. They actually fired into the crowds. Once again, another labor strike turned out pretty violent. Debs was sent to the jail for the first of many, many, many times, including for most of World War I. And became more radical because of this. He becomes more of a socialist and runs as a Socialist Party candidate later in his life. And so the election of 1896, you have all this turmoil going on. Grover Cleveland, who was the president in 1893 when the panic hit, people are done with him. They blame him for the problems. And so it's kind of, you have 2 fresh candidates in 1896. The Republicans nominate the Ohio man William McKinley to run for president. Marcus Alonzo Hanna was the guy that was the influential campaign manager. He's kind of the guy pulling the strings behind the scenes for the Republican Party. We'll learn more about him, Mark Hanna as they call him, later when we talk about the election in 1900 with Theodore Roosevelt, this up-and-coming political star, and his scheme to get him out of power. Hanna felt that the prime function of the government was to aid business, and he believed in the trickle-down effect. That's like 100 years before Reagan almost. I mean, that's a Ronald Reagan idea of trickle-down theory. It goes back to 1896. Their platform supported the gold standard, that money should be coined based on gold. You have $1 worth of gold somewhere, you can make a dollar bill And you don't print dollar bills unless you find more gold. It limits the amount that is in the economy, the amount of money out there. It helps prevent inflation. The Democrats and the Populists nominate the same guy, this up-and-coming shining star from Nebraska, the golden tongue of Nebraska, William Jennings Bryan. He supported inflation through unlimited coinage of silver. Let's make coins based on silver. You know, silver is maybe worth 1/16 of gold. We have to get 16 times the amount of silver to produce $1 worth of silver versus gold, but it would expand the economy. It would allow more money into the money system, into the economic, fiscal, all that stuff, and it would help people invest. This is a picture of the McKinley's campaign headquarters in 1896 in Chicago. For African Americans that could vote in this country, they still overwhelmingly voted Republican at that time. The party of Lincoln that helped end slavery. It's not until the Great Depression that African Americans largely shift to the Democratic Party, which most African Americans to this day vote Democrat. And like I said, that shift was during the Great Depression. This is crying for protection in 1896. They're wanting, these infant industries want protection. They want tariffs. They want help. So McKinley wins the election of 1896, even though the West largely supports William Jennings Bryan. Huge, great speaker. People loved to hear him speak. He had good ideas. He was just maybe a little too radical for some people in the East. Ideas were a little too forward-thinking for many people that were used to the traditional government. There was a contrast of campaign styles. Many of McKinley's votes came from the East. He kind of sat at home and wrote letters and didn't do much, whereas McKinley did the traditional, what we think of as campaigning, of going place to place, giving speeches, having rallies, jazzing up the crowd and all that good stuff. Many of Bryan's votes came from the debt-stricken South and the trans-Mississippi West. The election was the last election in which the candidate tried to win the election with the help of farmers. Farming population had dwindled so much that after this it didn't really matter as much to have the farmers or not. There were more people in the cities, so future elections tried to focus on winning that urban vote. This political era from 1896 to 1932 is called the fourth party system, largely because there's lower voter turnout, weakening the party organizations, and there's fading issues like civil service reform. The elections kind of go back and forth. These new political issues become concerned with industrial regulation, welfare of labor, basically the good of society is what comes to the forefront. And there's President-elect McKinley in the picture there. Here's the electoral map. You can see that the North and the East, and with the exception of California and Oregon, really voted McKinley. And then you have William Jennings Bryan dominating the South and most of the West. So the Dingley tariff bill, the Republicans, the industries wanted protection, and so they're going to pass this in 1897. These high tariff rates generate revenue to cover the annual Treasury deficit. So basically taxing imports, very high taxes, encourage people to buy American goods, and if people bought goods from other places, then they would actually generate a tax for that would help cover some of the deficits in the government. The Republicans claim credit for bringing prosperity to the nation following the Panic of 1893. You could probably argue it's just a normal boom and bust cycle of the economy in the 19th century. The Gold Standard Act of 1900 allowed paper money currency only be redeemed for gold, not silver. This is a political cartoon of William Jennings Bryan. His Cross of Gold speech, very, very famous speech, political speech from this time period. This is a little wheel thing that would show the two candidates running for president. You have McKinley and his platform and who he supported, and then if you moved a little bit, you get William Jennings Bryan and his platform and what he supported, and that's pretty neat. And I don't have one to show you how it works. Sorry, you can use your imagination. That's it. That's all we have for this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it. If you guys want to do some questions there, you can. Hope you learned something today. Take care.